Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Welcome to the Year of the Horse. So said the BBC News subtitles as we enter the Chinese New Year, which is, of course, is called the Year of the Horse. Alas, I believe the BBC's Freudian slip revealed a lot more about the true state of the British and global economies, that which is not allowed to be said publicly by the likes of the beloved Beeb. If you think about it, the elites in government, think tank, and business have been forcing public assets and their populations to turn tricks for bankers using the pip slap of death until the financiers plug those national assets with one too many loads of debt and then abandon the toothless hag of a nation screaming for more debt crack all the way to the glue factory. Yes, welcome to the Year of the Whores. Stacy?
Max. Well, you know, speaking of laughing and screaming your way for more debt on the way to the glue factory, we might want to look here where there's been a lot of horse riding going on. Real wages have been falling for the longest period for at least 50 years, ONS says. Real wages have been falling by 2.2% a year in the longest sustained period of falling real wages in the UK on record. We'll look at this chart that accompanies this. It's from 1964 to present, and it's average earnings growth with RPI, inflation stripped out, and this is from the Office of National Statistics, and you could see that real wages have been falling consistently since 2010. This is the longest period, Max, since the past 50 years.
Because wages are not needed. If you think about it, the nation pays its bills by collecting taxes. But since the central banks, in particular the Bank of England, simply prints money and hands it over to speculators who jack up prices of assets like real estate, and then they extract wealth to go spend on consumer stuff, you don't need wages, you don't need the taxes. You don't need taxes to pay your bills. The government doesn't need taxes. Therefore, there's no focus on increasing wages because they don't need the wages. The people who live on wages, month to month, on wages, are slowly being exterminated because they're not needed. Oh, they're only needed to borrow money. You're only as good as the amount you can borrow at Wonga. If you can't borrow anything at Wonga anymore, you're of no use to this nation, and you might as well just top yourself.
And just like all those young women who are trafficked into the sex trade, here these people are trafficked into the debt trade. And they always end up looking the same, haggard and you know, addicted at the end of it. And their whole situation gets worse and worse the longer they participate in the game. So in the UK, in terms of wages, those who basically bought this financialization of the economy, we see real wage growth averaged 2.9% in the 1970s and 1980s. 1.5% in the 1990s, 1.2% in the 2000s, but has fallen to minus 2.2% since the first quarter of 2010, the ONS figures showed. And yet, the rhetoric the whole time, whoever the pimp is telling them they're doing better and better all the time, and people seem to really believe it. Maybe they're addicted, so addicted to the debt that they think they're doing better.
Well, it's a poison chalice, this debt, because it is finite. Whereas the interest costs on the debts are infinite and will never be paid back. That's why there will be a global recalibration of the currency markets against something that has value like gold. And for those people who are being completely forced off the grid, they are into cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin as the only salvation they have to maintain any kind of personal sovereignty. Here in Britain, because so few people have individual sovereignty because they have no savings, the nation itself cannot claim to have genuine sovereignty above and beyond the debt crack whore slingers in the city and around the world. Therefore, it's a vassal state, it's an occupied state by debt crack slingers, debt whores. And of course, when you think about debt whores, I think about Christine Lagarde. I don't know why, but there she is, the IMF, and she just has this smarmy-looking face of a debt crack whore. But that's all I'll say about that.
Of a debt crack horse. Yes, because it's
she has a horsey look about her, too, like some of those, royals. There's Christine Lagarde. She's got that, aristocratic horsey look. It just so happens that here in the Year of the Horse, the BBC equates horses with whores. And apparently somebody over there either A, really knows the state of affairs, or B, they've got Dr. Freud as their title.
No, it's an algorithm that does those titles, so the algorithms know more. We're in an algorithmic world of driven by finance based on high-frequency trading, so the algorithm knows. It knows the truth. It sees the truth. And you mentioned gold bullion, and this brings us to the other aspect of financialization. Not only are real wages going down, they're convincing you to get onto the roulette wheel of housing, and this is the only way to get rich. Well, I realized that, you know, all these properties, and we've pointed them out many times right behind us, they're actually only being sold to Chinese investors, Asian investors, for example. They don't even market them to British people anymore. And so the reason why I see this is because they're talking about 35 million pound houses, for example, being sold. On 35 million pounds, Max, the storage of 35 million pounds worth of gold bullion would equate to up to 175,000 pounds a year. Here, the property tax, the annual council tax, is about 2,500 pounds on that. So what are you going to do? Spend 175,000 pounds storing gold bullion, or buy a property here and never look back?
No, I saw you tweet about this, and it's an excellent point. One of the reasons why you have a housing bubble here, and the Telegraph, by the way, this week just said that the London market real estate is now entering bubble territory. And it's not that they don't have demand for housing, it's that the housing market, particularly in London, is about 80% above where the underlying economic fundamentals would suggest. But you're saying something very key here, is that you've got 30, 40, 50, or $100 million. You're a Chinese investor who's made a lot of cash by milking and bilking the People's Bank of China for all the free money that they've created. You can put it into a gold vault and pay 1% or 1.5% or 2% a year in storage. Or you can just buy a property up in here on Millionaires Row in London, and they charge you a fraction of a fraction of a fraction in terms of a council tax. So it's virtually free storage of an asset that's going to go up with all the money printing. Yeah. So that's why there's less demand for gold, because you're paying less than 2% storage fee to buy a 30 or 40 or $50 million shack on Millionaires Row in London, and they don't maintain it. There's no maintenance. Yeah, these houses are falling apart.
Well, I'm going to go into that. It's actually not Millionaires Row, Max. It's called Billionaires Row. So let's talk about this article you're referring to. And it's called Inside Billionaires Row, London's Rotting Derelict Mansions Worth 350 million pounds. The North London street where billionaires can buy homes, never live in them, let them rot, and still make millions. They found the Saudi royal family, for example, owns 10 homes side by side, not doing a single bit of maintenance. They've never lived in them for 20 years. The people of the UK, of course, pay for maintenance of the roads outside it, around it, the police force that make sure nobody's breaking into these dilapidated homes. But here you have this aspect of parking their wealth. This financialized system has created haggy-looking homes.
So the derelict homes are a way to park cash that is going to increase in value because of the money that's being printed to bail out the zombie banks. It's cheaper than buying gold or silver, so why buy gold and silver? And it is subsidized by the very people whose wages are crashing relative to the money printing. So the people who are getting forced onto the reservation here in the UK, where the public services will be cut off, where heating is no longer affordable. You have fuel poverty, food poverty, and just poverty. Those people are living a life that is equatable to a third world nation, while the Saudi royal family just puts 30, 40, 50, $300 million into a chunk of real estate on Billionaires Row, pays no maintenance at all, and benefits from all the money printing of Mark Carney and his central banker friends.
And actually, The Guardian spoke to a man who was walking down the sidewalk, the pavement down there, and he was an Iranian guy. He didn't say his name, but he did say it was actually a horrible neighborhood to live in. He lived there, and he said because nobody's here. So it's deserted, it's dilapidated, all these homes are dilapidated, and there's the traffic on Bishop's Avenue is really fast. So he said it's not even worth living here, and yet the property prices are so high because it's like a bullion vault. And in fact, the mayor, Boris Johnson, has defied Downing Street to call for taxes to be cranked up on owners of vacant properties. He told city investors this month, quote, "London homes aren't just blocks of bullion in the sky."
Right. Well, that's exactly the point, is that this is an asset that's not being used in a way that would be germane to a functioning economy that's benefiting those who are contributing into the economy, either through by paying for the roads, paying for the services. Those people are being penalized by substandard wages, while their foreign investors are basically turning huge swaths of the capital into a feral nightmare of rat-infested billionaire mansions used purely for speculation that in the end will cause even more economic dislocation.
So I think London's probably the only place like this. Like if you bought a place in Manhattan, they're paying, you know, up to 2% of the value of the home per annum on property taxes. Here it's just not even a fraction of it's like a Satoshi they're charging them.
Yeah, well, I mean, the property in the UK is what cheese is to the French. It's a national obsession. People believe that it's only one way to get rich, and that's through property speculation. Their total identity is based on their homes. They watch Downton Abbey. They all want to live in Downton Abbey, and this is their identity.
Finally, on this sort of episode about the year of the horse and our dilapidated financial system looking very haggy, why this Harvard economist is pulling all his money from Bank of America. This is Terry Burnham, and he's a former Harvard economics professor and author of Mean Genes and Mean Markets and Lizard Brains. And he says that he's pulling his $1 million out of Bank of America. And why? Why do I risk starting a run on Bank of America by withdrawing my money and presuming that many fellow depositors will read this and rush to withdraw too? Because they pay me 0 interest. Thus, even an infinitesimal chance that Bank of America will not repay me in full whenever I ask switches the cost-benefit conclusion from stay to flee. So he said, for example, my $1 million, if there was even 1% chance that they would collapse and not be able to give him his money immediately, that he should be paid $10,000 per year for that risk.
Right, he makes the very same conclusion that Bank of America, with his $1 million in deposits, they've loaned $100 million out through the fractional reserve banking system, and that therefore, the chances of him not seeing his money are palpable, he should be paid at least some rate of return for that risk. He's getting no rate of return. It makes no economic sense to have your money in a money center bank in the US or the UK and get 0 rate of return on that money. You're just asking for trouble. You know, we told everyone to pull their money out of these banks 7, 8 years ago and buy gold and silver. When gold was at 400 and silver was at 7, we told them to buy Bitcoin when it was 5. And for the very reason, these banks are going under because they have too many. Anyway, we got to go. Stacy, see you around.
It's the year of the horse. Dump the banks, buy Bitcoin, gold, and silver.
Well said. All right, stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Andreas Antonopoulos, the go-to man for all things Bitcoin and crypto. He's now working for blockchain.info. Andreas, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thank you so much for having me, Max.
All right, Andreas, I want to start off actually with something that we heard recently. You know, Visa, the big processor of credit cards, on an investor conference call last week, the very first question the CEO received was about Bitcoin. So that's very interesting because we've seen Bitcoin is now on the radar of some folks that would naturally be in the crosshairs of potentially being disintermediated by Bitcoin. Talk about it a little bit.
Well, it was interesting also because the person who asked the question was an executive at Wells Fargo, so it was a nice little combination there. I think the response was pretty much spot on for an investor call. I mean, they couldn't say anything other than, you know, we look at it, it's interesting, we think it has some scaling issues and things like that. But they said we're paying attention, and that's as it should be. And they finished off the conversation by saying they're comfortable. I think that's probably a bit much to say, and I wouldn't be as comfortable in their position because they are likely to be disrupted and disintermediated quite solidly.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Bitcoin, the business, because clearly you've got retailers like Overstock realizes that it's a great way to pass on savings to consumers because the cost of transactions are fractional of what they would be if you used credit cards, et cetera. Folks like Western Union, they have an internal memo that I've seen where they're trying to get their minds around Bitcoin because clearly to send money point A to point B using Bitcoin, again, is 98% cheaper you know, than it would be through traditional means. And as a business, I mean, that's one of the primary points about Bitcoin is the business case. Forget about the interesting aspect of the software and is it a currency or not a currency. Just as a straight up and down business, this is a fantastic new business, correct?
Well, it's secure, it's fast, it's cheap. And as such, it's going to be attractive. For merchants, it massively reduces the risk because the transactions themselves don't need to be encrypted and the network doesn't need to be protected from fraud because computation ensures trust, not lack of access. So everyone can access the network, which makes it a lot easier for merchants to use Bitcoin for retail operations. There's no chargebacks, there's no fraud issues as before. It's much harder to steal a consumer's identity, so it's easier for consumers. And you don't need all of the identity information. Like at the moment, if you want to do a credit card transaction, you have to provide your address, your name, the credit cards, and all of this information. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's a single click. So when you make it frictionless, when you make it riskless, and you make it secure and fast and cheap for consumers, that is definitely appealing to merchants. It's a really good, efficient form of money for the internet.
Yeah, over the holidays, there were the reports, Target, Neiman Marcus, big retailers in the U.S. that had breaches on their credit cards. Millions of customers, tens of millions of customers, huge breach of data. And of course, that would never happen with Bitcoin.
Right. I mean, the big difference is that the traditional payment systems are pull systems, which means that when you use a credit card, what you're doing is you're authorizing a future pull from your account and potentially many more future pulls from your account. That's why you have to give so much identity information. Whereas Bitcoin is a push system. You create the single little chunk of money that you're sending, and you send that, and it can't be compromised.
So the business case of Bitcoin is solid. You know, if you look at the history of technology, we've had some technological breakthroughs. We had the email, we had the internet itself, we've had, and this has been the thrust of business growth in America and around the world. So let's talk about the regulatory front for a second, because on the regulation side, there seems to be some give and take here. The New York hearings on Bitcoin, they just concluded. What's your takeaway on the hearings? You know, there seems to be some pushback on their side. Talk about it.
I was rather disappointed to see a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt being introduced into the equation. FUD. But it was mostly because of lack of understanding of the underlying dynamics of the system. And I think a lot of it was due to misinformation and kind of knee-jerk reaction. Over time, as people get to understand the Bitcoin business case and the technology a bit better, I think that fear is going to go away. You know, Bitcoin is not hostile to regulators. It's not hostile to law enforcement. In fact, it's very easy to do law enforcement on Bitcoin. And regulators will find that over time, the fact that Bitcoin is regulated by algorithm provides a lot of certainty and reduces risk. I think eventually banks are going to adopt Bitcoin and use it, and will be very happy to use it as a very powerful medium. This is not at all different from what we saw in the early days of the internet, when there was a lot of FUD and people couldn't quite see how this technology would provide benefits. What they saw was the dark side, and what they saw was the disruption it could cause to their business models. But eventually they began to see how this could generate its own economy and its own progress and jobs and innovation and growth, and for politicians also votes. And as a result, they started seeing the good side of it. We've already made the transition where the vast majority of the uses for Bitcoin are mainstream, they're positive, they're business-oriented. And as more people see that, I think all of these discussions are going to be part of the past.
Now, within the Bitcoin community, there seems to be a little bit of a split, if you will. There's one camp that's going down the path of the white coin or coin validation, that coins need to be identified as clean, or they need to be friendly to the regulators. I mean, when I started to see that, it seemed to me to go completely against the ethos of Bitcoin, and it also opened up some problems in terms of, you know, not to get too technical, but the fungibility debate or issue. But what are your thoughts on this idea? Because the hearing certainly played into the hands of the coin validation crowd, who were, you know, sent an email around saying, look, you see, this is what's needed. But what do you think about this?
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding as to whether Bitcoin is anonymous or untraceable. And of course, Bitcoin is not anonymous, and it is very much traceable. However, what it does is it enables people to achieve some basic privacy, which then takes some effort to undo. But if you have a targeted reason for law enforcement to track something, they can track it quite easily. Now, tracking every single individual coin is something that we don't do in the banking system, and we don't do in cash, and we certainly don't do through credit cards. And trying to do that would damage the fungibility of the coin and would create a more, let's say, totalitarian coin, which is really unnecessary, because law enforcement certainly has the tools, as they've demonstrated, to stop bad actors using Bitcoin. And in fact, it's very convenient for law enforcement. For example, if you want to trace a payment through the traditional banking system, you have to go and do subpoenas to every single intermediary who's touched that money. Whereas with Bitcoin, you have a centralized ledger that can be used to track bad uses of the currency. So I think this is a lot of misunderstanding about the core value of the currency, and eventually we're going to see these discussions fade away.
You think they'll just fade away?
Yes, absolutely, because the utility will override these instincts to control, which are really driven by fear, and that fear is driven by a lack of understanding of how the system works.
On the finance side of things, the need for fungibility is clear. When you're making markets in any kind of security or currency, the market maker needs an inventory of that particular security or currency, and they need to be able to transact things like short sales, which tend to be, that's where the fungibility comes in. You know, people don't understand when they open a brokerage account, for example, their stock is owned by the firm, and then the firm can lend that out, and it's fungible in a sense that there is a CUSIP number attached to those securities, but they're not considered part of the equation when they're making markets in those securities. So by identifying coins in the way that some are suggesting, it eliminates the ability to create a robust, active market-making function, which is necessary, which opens up the question about derivatives. Now, there is plenty of room for derivatives on Bitcoin. The name derivatives suggests that prices are derived from something. The problem with the current derivatives market is that the prices are derived from prices based on other derivatives. Whereas if the prices are derived from Bitcoin, Bitcoin is like gold in this sense, and you have a solid valuation for Bitcoin. So you shouldn't be afraid of derivatives in the same way that they are being spun these days. Your thoughts?
The underlying asset itself is deterministically issued, and that creates some certainty. So you can expect that at a certain point of time, a certain number of Bitcoins will exist. And you can base that and understand what the monetary supply will be at any point in time in the future. And that gives you a level of certainty that allows you to evaluate the value of derivatives built on top of that. So it creates a solid, sound money supply underneath. I think we will see derivatives, and I think that derivatives will allow the kind of contrarian speculation of shorts that are probably necessary to stop these lurches and to create less volatility. Now, we've seen volatility in the currency decrease every single year as the pool of liquidity gets bigger. You get less sloshing around of liquidity every time someone sneezes in the media. But you know, the introduction of shorts would probably make that better. Right now, when there's really good news, there's nothing to constrain the growth of the price, so it shoots up very rapidly. And if you had
shorts,
shorts,
exactly the same with an IPO of an over-the-counter stock, where they're only releasing 5% of the stock. There's nothing to short, and you had these 2, 3, 500% pops. You know, going back to the dot-com boom.
And then they reset to a more rational values after. And these are not really bubbles being inflated and popped. They're really just overreactions and overcorrections to the market pricing underneath. I think shorts will give us a bit more stability. So I don't see any problem with these derivatives, especially
because the underlying asset is sound. I mean, people make the comparison to gold. And even James Turk, who is one of the biggest names in gold, just came out and said, you know, the debate is over. Bitcoin is here to stay. And I know James for a long time, and we've talked about it. He says, yes, you can make the case that Bitcoin is gold in the sense that it has unimpeachable value. There's a limited supply. And it has all the attributes of gold.
But it can be teleported, and that's the brilliant part of it. It's gold without the physical burden of carrying it around or trying to slice it into smaller pieces. It can be teleported across the world for very little cost or no cost at all. And it can be sliced into infinitesimal little pieces, which takes away two of the biggest problems with gold.
Yeah, it's an improvement on gold in many ways, and I think the gold community now seems to be understanding this anyway. Some of the leading lights are now figuring out that, in fact, this is a technological improvement. Let's talk about Charlie Shrem for a second, because here's one of the co-founders of the Bitcoin Foundation. It seems to be, you know, justice is two-tier justice, because what he's allegedly involved with, the numbers are quite minuscule when you compare it to some of these bigger banks that are caught But the alleged infractions of Charlie Shrem involved money laundering with amounts in the $1 million range. Compared with HSBC that got busted for multi-billion-dollar money laundering.
About 150 billion.
Yeah, Wachovia, 400 billion. You know? So, but they just pay or it's deferred prosecution. They just say, well, we'll get around to prosecution someday. So here, our regulators, you know, it seems awfully aggressive in this space. Are we going to see more of this type of thing where they've clearly it's a two-tier system and they're attacking Charlie Shrem here?
Well, I think the indictment is also weak because from what I read, what they're alleging is that Charlie Shrem provided bitcoins to someone else who was a money market maker on Silk Road who was providing bitcoins to users of Silk Road who were using some of them to buy drugs. So it's like kind of 3 degrees. And really the main accusation is that he didn't file the correct suspicious activity reports on the other party who was doing the suspicious activity, not himself. So, I mean, without a doubt, there's some heavy-handed prosecution. You know, it's funny because this is the first time someone was led away in handcuffs in New York since 2008. They haven't done that for anyone else. You know, all these people who stole trillions.
Robert Goodfriend of Salomon Brothers was frog marched out of the office. You know, going back to the Liar's Poker